Shalom Aleichem. Hi everyone and welcome to Jerusalem. Okay, so the last few videos that I've done teaching style have been pounding historical perspective matters pretty hard. So I actually thought that maybe today we would meet and talk and I would share a testimony and do something just a little bit more personal. We're gonna just talk a little bit about how it is that I personally and the body of Messiah here walks out times of conflict, and I'm going to share with you all some about a situation that happened back in 2015. So I am Callie Mitchell and this is my channel, I Will Not Keep Silent, and I'm so glad you are all here with us today. Okay, as you all probably know, we are in the Muslim holiday of Ramadan. In the week before Ramadan started, Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh issued a call for the Muslim community to hold a march to Temple Mount on the first day of Ramadan. And as far as I'm aware, that did not happen. We didn't have any major incidents. And he did also call again for some type of uprising to take place on the first Friday of Ramadan, which was just a few days ago. And again, everything has been pretty peaceful for the most part. I've heard a little bit of thwarted plans here and there, but nothing major or significant. But of course, if you could imagine that as we're hearing this from Hamas leaders in the week leading up to Ramadan, that it was generating some anxiety in the community about what would happen. Because at the same time that the Muslim leaders were issuing these calls, Israel was coming under a tremendous amount of pressure from the U.S. administration to enter into a ceasefire agreement. And of course, this, to us as Israelis, this kind of felt like adding insult to injury, because October 7th was a holiday. It was Simchat Torah, which is the last day of Sukkot, and it's the celebration of the rolling back of the Torah scroll. So we were in holiday mode and Hamas attacked. And so for us here, it's like, you really think we should stop our war to honor their holiday? It did seem to me that the U.S. administration was also concerned about the possibility of increase in violence, and that we were in discussions about entering into Rafah on the first day of Ramadan. That didn't happen. The war cabinet has still been meeting to finalize plans on that decision. But it was just a very intense time that week before the first day of Ramadan. And there were a lot of prophetic words circulating from believers just about what could potentially happen. When it comes to that sort of thing, I like to listen and hear what other people are saying, but I always try to make sure I'm weighing it against God's word and against what I feel the Lord is telling me and my family to do. I actually felt in my heart that on that Sunday, which was marking the first day of Ramadan that evening, that I should stay home and just have a posture of prayer. And it wasn't even that I was afraid of leaving the house, that something might happen. I just really felt strongly to intercede for Israel and our Muslim neighbors, just that the Lord would move and that there would not be anything that happened that was outside of his will, that even my Muslim neighbors would come to faith during Ramadan. I actually have a friend who is an Arab Christian who came to faith out of Islam during Ramadan, and now she works with a Messianic Jewish community. So it's just really amazing how that has kind of come full circle. So that does happen, and so just really, I just really wanted to hold a posture of prayer for them, for their salvation and for the safety of Israel, that the words of the Hamas leaders would fall flat. Yeah, and so far so good. So far we are holding a peace. But this is a sensitive time, and just thinking through the possibilities of what could potentially happen. As I was hearing the Hamas leader, I was seeing him issue these speeches and hearing translations of him with my own ears, and it was really taking me back to 2015 when we were in the season of the knife intifada, the stabbing intifada, the wave of terror, the wave of violence. No one defined it by an actual name, but those were the four names that you could potentially hear it referred to. That was a really intense time here in Jerusalem. Honestly, that season where we had 2 to 3 stabbings a day for months, if not a year. It was actually more disruptive to my daily life than this war has been. This war has been very intense too, but in a different way than that wave of violence that we had in 2015, because most of the war has been contained in the south and in the north. It hasn't been affecting our daily lives here in Jerusalem. We haven't had even any sirens since late December, early January, and we've just been very safe and encouraged to do life as normal as possible. But we're not unaware of the magnitude of the events that are taking place on our borders. Everyone is keenly aware that we have over 130 hostages still in Gaza, and we don't know who's still alive. And we all have friends and family who are in the IDF and serving in Gaza or on the northern border. It's not something that has escaped us, but for the most part we are functioning fairly normal. Back in 2015 though, when the stabbings were occurring, that was something that was happening primarily in Jerusalem, in other places too, but Jerusalem I think was hit hardest. And it was a very intense time, and it did cause us to have to make changes to our daily lives. I was bringing my oldest into the center of the city for Gan, which is preschool, and I ended up having to change our entire bus route for how we got in to avoid sensitive areas in the city. I was on the bus 4 hours every day just to make sure we were staying in safe areas. So that situation back in 2015, what happened there, it was also related to Temple Mount. If you've been following, then you know that I've been doing a series of videos about the history of Jewish and Arab relations as it's related to Temple Mount. And the events that happened in 2015 were no different. That wave of violence in 2015 started in September of that year, and it happened at the incitement of Mahmoud Abbas, the chairman of the Palestinian Authority. He incited violence by saying that the Jewish people, Israelis, were desecrating Al-Aqsa and, interestingly, also the Holy Sepulchre with their quote-unquote filthy feet, which is honestly quite a strange and racist thing to say. So that launched what we were referring to at the time as lone wolf terrorist attacks, where basically people who were not affiliated with any kind of terrorist organization were going out and indiscriminately stabbing Israelis and ramming bus and train stops with their cars. And people of all ages were doing this. It was men and women alike. It was young adults. It was youth. It was older adults. It was pretty indiscriminate as to who was participating, and it was also indiscriminate as to who they were targeting. Early into this wave of violence, the Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh actually called for a day of rage. And that's something that they commonly will do. The Hamas leaders or the PA leaders, they will issue a call for a day of rage. We hear that often. And sometimes people respond and sometimes they don't. And throughout the course of this time, Mahmoud Abbas would continue to incite it. He would regularly and repeatedly call it a justified public uprising. Also, another Hamas leader, Khaled Masha'al, and I'm sorry, I'm probably not pronouncing that exactly correctly, but he also incited violence. He spoke almost verbatim from the Hamas charter in December of that year, and he said, "The so-called peace process is futile. There is no peace, only the path of jihad, sacrifice, and blood will bear fruit." And this is nearly identical to the 13th article of the Hamas Charter. So the point I'm trying to make is that there was a tremendous amount of incitement from both Hamas and Palestinian Authority leaders to carry out these really vile attacks. And as someone who was kind of walking through this at the time, you know, I had my biggest, who was 5, and I had my second one, who was a very small baby. She was not even a year old when these attacks first started. And then they carried on well into 2016. So I went through an entire pregnancy with my third baby while these were going on. So we were really having to live life with 2 to 3 stabbings a day and possible car rammings. And it was a very scary time. As I was kind of getting my thoughts together about what I wanted to share with you all about the particular testimony I had related to this time, I decided to go back and look at my notes, and I found an article that I had written about this particular incident. And as I was looking at it, I thought I really should just read them parts of this article, because there was something about seeing it in my own words as it was taking place that was just even more meaningful to me than if I was to just talk you all through what happened again. So I'm going to read this, and again, this is my words. This was my experience. This is something I literally went through, and I'm just reading to you all what I wrote in the weeks following what happened. I have a glorious testimony to share about the Lord answering prayer for protection. But first, I want to be honest and vulnerable with you all about how intense it has been. I have no idea what the media exposure outside of Israel has been like, but on the ground, it has been the most evil situation I have ever encountered in my entire life. On the worst days, the evil seemed almost tangible, like a dark cloud had settled over Jerusalem. Now, I want to speak to that a little bit. It was extremely evil. I think in the time that I had been here up until then, I had experienced a few conflicts with Gaza, and also there was a series of bulldozing events where Arab workers on bulldozers would use them to push over cars and buses. There was also car rammings, but there was something about this stabbing that just had a different evil to it. And of course, I was not here during the second Intifada. My husband was. So this was the worst that I had experienced at that time. And I think there was something about the fact that when they were conducting the stabbings, they were so close to the person that they were intending to murder. And it was literally spilling blood. And there were a number of occasions where we were very close by to things happening. And it was almost like there was something that felt personal in a different way than when the stories would come up of someone bulldozing over a bus or something, which were equally destructive, if not more so, but just that knife attack was really hard to cope with. And when we would ride the bus we lived in a different neighborhood, it was called Arnona, and when we would ride the bus into Jerusalem, there was a place in which our bus would begin turning to the left at the Mount Zion Hotel, overlooking the Valley of Gehenna, with Mount Zion on the opposite side. And for a long time, I felt peaceful until we got to that very place. And then when we would get there, the atmosphere would change, and it would feel scary and quite evil. And I don't know how to explain it, except that in reading Exodus, where it talks about the darkness being something, it was so dark that they could feel it. I remember sitting there on the bus one day and being like, Lord, it's not physically dark, the sun is still out and I still see, but the presence of evil is so strong here that I almost feel like I feel it. It was very, it was just very subjective and very personal, but it was very real at the same time. So just continue on to read what I wrote in that article. I said, the mental, emotional, and spiritual war that comes with the spirit of terror is one of the most intense situations I've ever faced. Particularly on the day after witnessing the aftermath of an attack, I battled hard against fearful thoughts that someone could jump out and start stabbing at any moment. I literally choked back tears for hours, afraid that something was going to happen to my husband Devin while we were apart. As I've met with the Lord in prayer, He has spoken to my heart that He was restraining much more evil than we even knew. Fear was a real battle. It really was. And, we would have these events happen, and sometimes even close to home. And it was really Devin would leave in the morning for work, and I would just hug him and just pray that he came home, And I think all of us in that season were sort of walking out life in that posture. And it was also just really hard feeling afraid of our Arab neighbors, because I had not ever feared them. The Lord had purposed in my heart that I was here to help bring the gospel of Messiah Yeshua, that salvation came through the Jewish Messiah to all nations. I was here to share that good news with them. And there was one day in particular where I was sitting at a bus stop with my 5-year-old and my tiny baby, and it was a bus stop that some of the buses that went into the Arab villages also stopped at, and there was a number of Arab neighbors sitting there, and I remember feeling so afraid and I'm gonna cry about it. But I was so afraid, and I didn't know what to do with that emotion, because I was like, Lord, I can't share the gospel with these people if I'm afraid of them. But what about my children? And it was really hard, guys. I'm crying. It still feels really raw. So I really had to purpose in my heart that, my life and the life of my children belonged to the Lord, and we were going to do what we could to share truth. And we were just going to trust Him and go about life, exercising wisdom, but we weren't going to live in fear, but it was really a battle. Okay, so back to my article. While I was reading a news story about a thwarted attack recently, I recognized the background scenery of a photo in the article as being the street on the east edge of our neighborhood, Arnona. It was startling to see, because I had been in that area with friends a few days prior. Just the 4 of us, young wives with our small babies. We prayer walked a big loop around Arnona's outside streets, proclaiming scripture, asking for the Lord's protection while pleading for the salvation of the Jewish and the Arab people. Let me just tell you what we were doing. Because you all, we definitely live in community here. We're part of a congregation. We have a wonderful community of believers in Messiah Yeshua that we are very much part of and hold a variety of leadership roles in. And at that time, the neighborhood that we lived in, Arnona, we had a huge group of believing families, Messianic Jewish or Christian volunteers who were here serving in ministries from all over the world. And we decided, at the leadership of one of our friends in the neighborhood, that we were going to begin prayer walking our neighborhood during the season of violent stabbings. So we met on Mondays. It was either 9 or 9:30, I can't remember, but I would drop off my son from a preschool, and then I would come home, take a minute, maybe get some water, coffee or something, and then I would go out with baby Lydia in the baby carrier, and we would meet our friends, and we would walk the perimeter of our neighborhood, and we would pray. And we would pray God's protection over our neighborhood. And we would pray for the salvation of Israel. And we would pray for the salvation of our Arab neighbors. And we prayed. We were like the stroller brigade. Just a group of moms just submitting ourselves to the Lord for His use and trusting Him with the power of prayer. And we had other friends ask if they could join us. And our friend that organized the event, she was very much convinced that this just needed to be for people who lived in our neighborhood, and that if people from outside neighborhoods asked, we directed them to do the same thing in their own neighborhood. So there's one particular Monday where we went and we prayed, and as we were going through the neighborhood, there was one street in particular that bordered another neighborhood called Armon Hanatzif. And we stopped on that street, and we just really, really prayed. We were pouring out our hearts in prayer to the Lord and just pleading with Him to cover that street in the blood of Messiah Yeshua, and to protect us, and to not allow any spirit of terror to enter into our neighborhood, and that would be a boundary, and that nothing evil would enter our neighborhood from that street. And I don't know why we were focusing on that street in particular, but that's just what the leading of the Holy Spirit was. We got to that street and we were just pleading with the Lord for his protection. So then, as the article describes, what ended up happening is that on Shabbat, a few days later, I woke up and at some point in the morning, I opened up my computer and I looked at the news, and I cannot remember if it was JPost or Times of Israel, but there was a big picture of that particular street on my screen. And as I proceeded to read, what I realized is that there was a terrorist who was apprehended and neutralized right before he entered our neighborhood, right at that street where we were praying. And I'm just gonna be honest that I was full of fear. I was really like, what are we doing? We are a group of moms with very small babies. We all had babies with us, every single one of us. And we were just walking in this place where there was a terrorist attack, or one that was basically thwarted. You know, is this safe? Should we be doing this? And I'm thinking, maybe we need to talk. Like, maybe I need to talk to the ladies Monday and be like, guys, I don't know, maybe we need to meet and pray in someone's house. I'm not really sure. So I was just looking at it thinking we were just there. What if that had been us, you know? And so going back to my article and the way that I described it back in the days following this actually happened, I wrote, in all honesty, the story caused me to fear, knowing that we had been in that location with our children. The next meeting, however, my friend, we'll call her B, pointed out something I didn't see. She reminded us that on that very street, we asked the Lord to cause all evil to pass over for the blood of Messiah Yeshua, and we prayed a hedge of fire to block all evil activity in that location. And just days later, a soldier apprehended a terrorist who had attempted a stabbing at the very border that we had established before him. I mean, wow, right? The Lord did not permit his feet to cross the territory that we had claimed in his name. But very somberly, we praised him for hearing us, with the knowledge that the terrorist died apart from knowing salvation in Yeshua, and that truth makes this real. And that was the reality, you all. Like, it wasn't something that we could jump up and down and celebrate, because the consequence of this terrorist, who was actually a minor, when I looked at the story just in preparing for this, I don't even think I knew at the time, but he was just 16. And as a mother of a 14-year-old now, it really breaks my heart. I'm gonna cry again. But yeah, as a mother of a 14-year-old, I just am so sorry that this was the consequence for what happened. But when you look at what was taking place, I mean, he pulled out a giant knife and he was stabbing someone. And, you know, I think there is a consequence for attempted murder. And I don't know, sometimes I feel like we put too much, we have too high of standards for what the IDF is capable of knowing. Like, they couldn't just look at this person and know that he was 16 and not 18. And again, our prayer was really sincerely for the protection of our neighborhood and for the salvation of both the Jewish people and the Arab people. But there is a principle of consequence for the defense of the innocent. And that is the reality of the situation that we find ourselves in. But in any case, it is very sobering, and really, you all, we are in a situation here where that is what we deal with. It is life or death in a lot of cases, and I'm just really thankful that the Lord heard us and that he did prevent evil intentions from entering into our neighborhood, and just continue to pray for the salvation of our neighbors, you know, because ultimately that is the only solution. And you know, I really enjoy going through and looking at the historical context of what's happening and helping you all to understand the bigger picture. But guys, you know, I live here, and it's not lost on me that ultimately this is a spiritual battle. Yeshua, Messiah Yeshua, he's the Jewish Messiah, and he's going to be returning. He told us in Acts, he said he was going to return the same way that he left in the clouds. He's going to be returning, and he's returning to a Jewish Israel. You know, Zechariah 12:10, it says, and you will look upon and you will look upon me, on him whom you have pierced, and you will mourn, as one mourns for a firstborn son. He is the Son of God, and there will be a day that the Jewish people look upon him and they mourn on him whom they have pierced. Remember Isaiah 53, he was pierced for our transgressions. What happened on the cross? His hands were pierced. And there will be a day that he will return, and he will return to a Jewish Israel, and the spiritual enemy knows this. So we just have to keep praying. I do hope that this was a hard story, but I do hope that you all will be encouraged to continue to pray for Israel, and also that you will be encouraged to prayer walk your own neighborhoods. I do believe in the power of prayer, and I believe that it bears fruit, and it does things in the spirit that we can't even see. And I just would encourage you guys just to continue to pray for Israel, and continue to pray for the salvation of the Jewish people and the salvation of the Arab people, and even prayer walk your own communities and see what the Lord does. So again, if this channel is helpful for you in any way, please do make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, and share with a friend. But again, I appreciate all of you, and y'all, for Zion's sake, please do not keep silent. Please continue to speak up and share the truth of God's word about Israel, and be blessed. See you next video.